What's the most twisted thing your parent demanded you lie about? My mother slid a paper across the kitchen table and said, "Tell the judge your father touched you, or you'll never see your little brother again." My parents had been divorcing for 3 months after Dad caught Mom with her boss. But this was something else entirely. "I won't get custody without leverage," Mom explained. "Your father makes $300,000 a year. I make 40. Unless you say this happened, we'll be homeless." My 8-year-old brother Archie sat next to me, eating cereal. I noticed him wince when he reached for his spoon and caught a glimpse of purple bruising under his sleeve. Mom had said he fell off the swings yesterday. "I already told Mrs. Jenkins at school about what your dad did," Mom said with a wink, and my stomach dropped. Mrs. Jenkins was the guidance counselor. "There's no going back now, Cleo." The thing was, I knew exactly what Mom was capable of. Last week she'd been drunk by noon, and I'd seen her raise her hand toward Archie. So I shoved him into the bathroom with his iPad and locked the door. Then gave Mom 2 of her Xanax and made up a story about breaking her favorite vase to redirect her rage onto me instead. It worked. It always worked when I was there. Archie had whispered to me that night, his small voice breaking, "Mommy hurts me when you're at Dad's." I recorded it on my phone, not knowing what else to do. "I've already scheduled therapy appointments for your trauma," she said, sliding more papers across the table. "Just stick to the script." The papers had practice questions. "Where did he touch you? How often? What did he say to keep you quiet?" "If you don't do this," Mom said, her voice dropping to that dangerous whisper I knew too well, "I'll take Archie and disappear. You'll never find us." The threat hit me like ice water. I looked at my little brother, remembering how I'd feel his bruised ribs against my back when he curled up behind me. That night, I lay awake staring at family photos on my phone. Dad teaching me to ride a bike. Dad at every single recital, every soccer game. The next morning, I went to Dad's apartment. He looked terrible. Hadn't been sleeping, hadn't been eating right. "The school called," he said, confused. "They asked me if everything was okay at home. They wouldn't tell me what was wrong." "Cleo, is someone bullying you? Whatever happens, I'm here for you." I almost broke down right there. Almost told him everything. But Archie's bruises flashed in my mind. Mom had scheduled a therapy session that afternoon. But when we got there, I realized the therapist was just her friend Donna, who used to be a counselor. I hid my phone in my backpack and hit record. "The key is details that feel real but can't be disproven," Donna coached. "Crying helps. Practice crying on cue." She actually taught me techniques, thinking about dead pets, pinching myself where it wouldn't show. "The school documentation helps. That teacher paying attention to you? Perfect evidence of you seeking father figures." My skin crawled as Mom practiced my testimony with me. It was summer vacation, when I had my innocence torn from me. I wanted to throw up, but I kept recording. That evening, Archie asked me why Daddy couldn't come home. "Is it because of me?" he asked, and I realized it was a lose-lose situation. By Friday, Mom was escalating. "The preliminary hearing is Monday. Mess this up and we disappear forever." She showed me fake IDs she'd already had made. New names, new life. "I have $50,000 from your college fund ready to go." I kept recording everything. Mom admitting Dad never hurt anyone. "Obviously he never touched you, but judges believe tearful daughters." Mom laughing about what would happen to him. "Prison, SX offender registry, who cares?" By Sunday night, I couldn't stop shaking. Mom gave me half a Xanax to calm my nerves. I hid it in my cheek. Then finally came Monday morning at the courthouse. Mom squeezed my hand hard enough to hurt. "Remember, tears sell truth." Her lawyer started strong. "Cleo has something difficult to share about her father. The school has documented behavioral changes concerning patterns." I stood up and pulled out my phone. "I do have something to share." Mom's face flickered with confusion, then rage as I hit play. Her voice filled the courtroom. "Tell the judge your father touched you, or you'll never see your little brother again." Then Dad's lawyer stood up with a manila folder I hadn't expected. "Your Honor, this woman made identical accusations against her own father at age 15. Her father had been molested by his stepfather. Her grandmother knew and did nothing. This is a generational pattern of projection." The truth hit me like a physical blow. She was replaying trauma, creating false accusations because real ones were never addressed. Suddenly Tyler stood up. "None of this is true! Dad did hurt me!" That's when I realized Mom had been training him too. The judge slammed his gavel down so hard the sound made everyone jump. Tyler kept shouting and pointing at Dad while Mom grabbed his arm trying to pull him back down. The bailiff stepped forward, raising his hand for silence. The judge hit the gavel 3 more times before the bailiff announced we were taking immediate recess, and nobody could leave the building. Mom's grip on Tyler's arm turned white-knuckled as she yanked him toward her seat. Dad just stood there frozen like he couldn't process what was happening. The bailiff started herding everyone out into the hallway, while the judge disappeared through his chamber's door. Out in the hallway, Dad slumped against the wall and his whole body started shaking. His lawyer leaned close, whispering urgently about how Tyler was obviously another victim of coaching just like me. 20 feet away, Mom stood gripping Tyler's shoulders so hard he winced. Her face kept switching between this weird, triumphant smile and pure panic as people stared at us. Tyler wouldn't look at anyone and kept his eyes on the floor. Archie broke away from the court officer and ran straight to me, burying his face in my stomach. His whole body shook as he whispered he was scared over and over. I held him tight, feeling his tears soak through my shirt while watching Tyler shrink under Mom's grip. The confidence he'd shown shouting in the courtroom was completely gone now. The judge's assistant came out and called both lawyers into chambers, leaving the rest of us standing in the hallway. Through the small window in the door, I could see the judge gesturing with his hands while both lawyers stood there nodding. Dad's lawyer kept pointing at some papers while Mom's lawyer shook his head. We stood there for 40 minutes with nobody talking except the occasional whisper. Archie stayed pressed against me the whole time. Mom kept trying to catch my eye, but I wouldn't look at her. Finally, the lawyers came back out and Dad's lawyer cleared her throat to get everyone's attention. She announced the judge was ordering immediate CPS involvement, and all exchanges between parents would be supervised only from now on. Mom started yelling about her rights and how this wasn't fair. Her lawyer grabbed her arm and pulled her aside, hissing at her to stay quiet before she made things worse. The judge came back out and stood in the doorway to address everyone formally. He stated no children would be removed from either home while the investigation was pending. All exchanges had to happen at the supervised visitation center starting immediately. He scheduled emergency CPS intake appointments for all 3 of us kids within 72 hours. Mom's face went pale when he mentioned CPS would be interviewing each child separately. That evening, back at Dad's apartment, his phone buzzed with an email notification. His hands shook as he read it out loud, saying HR was placing him on administrative leave with pay. The allegations had to be investigated according to company policy, even though nothing was proven. He forwarded it to his lawyer, then put his head in his hands. I saw tears running down his face that he tried to hide by turning away from me and Archie. Archie asked if Daddy was in trouble, and I told him everything would be okay, even though I wasn't sure. 3 days later, the doorbell rang at 8 in the morning. CPS caseworker Gwendolyn Valdez stood there with a clipboard and a kind smile. She was professional but gentle as she explained she needed to do a home visit and talk to each of us. She walked through the apartment, taking notes about the living conditions and food in the fridge. When she got to Archie, she knelt down to his level and asked him to show her his room. I watched her take photos of the fading bruises on his arms with a special camera. She asked him about Mom's house, and he flinched before saying he didn't want to talk about it. She made notes on her clipboard and told him he was very brave. Then Gwendolyn asked to speak with me privately in my room. I showed her my phone with all the recordings I'd been making for months. She asked if I had them backed up anywhere else, and I showed her my laptop and the cloud storage where I'd uploaded everything. She took detailed notes about dates and times while listening to Mom coaching me about the fake allegations. She said she needed to review everything with her supervisor before making any recommendations to the court. Her face stayed neutral, but I saw her jaw tighten when she heard Mom threatening to disappear with Archie. Before she left, she gave me her card and said I could call her anytime if I felt unsafe. About a week later, we got a letter saying the court appointed guardian ad litem Douglas McHugh to represent our best interests. He scheduled separate interviews with each of us kids at his office downtown. When we met him, he explained his job was to tell the judge what was really best for us, not what our parents wanted. He had toys and coloring books in his office, but also a serious expression that made me trust him. He said he'd be talking to our teachers and doctors and anyone else who knew our family. His job was to be our voice in court when we couldn't speak for ourselves. The next week, Dad's lawyer called saying she'd arranged for a pediatrician named Amy Chandler to examine Archie properly. We drove to her office where she had special cameras and measuring tools laid out on a table. Amy was gentle with Archie, letting him play with a toy dinosaur while she carefully looked at the bruises on his ribs and arms. She took photos from every angle and measured each mark with a ruler, writing notes about how the patterns didn't match falling off playground equipment. She pointed out to Dad's lawyer how the bruises were in places kids don't usually hurt themselves playing, like the inside of his upper arms where someone would grab him. Archie didn't say much, but he let her document everything, and she gave him stickers when we were done. After that, I had to go to Dad's lawyer's office for hours to work on my recordings. She had some tech person there who explained how phone recordings have hidden data showing exactly when they were made. We went through every single recording I had, writing down the date and time and what was happening in each one. The lawyer made me write out this huge timeline of everything I'd witnessed or recorded, making sure all the dates matched up with text messages and photos on my phone. My hand cramped from writing so much, but she said the metadata would prove I didn't make these recordings after Mom's accusations started. That night I couldn't sleep, so I started Googling everyone involved in this mess. When I typed in Donna's name, a bunch of results came up about her losing her counseling license. The state board website had this whole report about ethics violations from 2 years ago. She'd been caught giving therapy advice without a license and lying about her credentials to clients. I printed out every page of the disciplinary action report and drove it to Dad's lawyer's office first thing in the morning. She actually smiled when she saw it and said this was exactly what she needed. A few days later, Gwendolyn mailed me a copy of her intake report to check if everything was accurate. Reading it felt weird, seeing our family described in all this clinical language. She'd written about significant risk factors, and concerning behavioral patterns, and trauma indicators. We weren't people in the report, just case numbers and evidence. She described Archie's bruises as suspicious injury patterns inconsistent with reported cause. She wrote about my parentification and protective behaviors toward younger sibling. Everything was true, but seeing it written out like that made our whole situation feel like we were just another messed up family in her files. Late one night, my phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "We just gotta say what Mom said or she gets really mad." I stared at it for maybe 10 seconds before he deleted it, but I'd already taken a screenshot and emailed it to myself and uploaded it to 3 different cloud services. My hands were shaking because this was Tyler admitting Mom was coaching him too. The next morning, Mrs. Jenkins called asking if we could meet about the concerning situation she'd reported to CPS. When I got to the school, she kept adjusting her glasses and explaining how she was a mandated reporter. She said when Mom told her about Dad, she had no choice but to report it. She kept saying she was just following protocol and she hoped I understood. She seemed more worried about getting in trouble than about what was actually happening to us. A week later, Douglas scheduled his interview with Archie at the CPS office. He brought a whole bag of toys and art supplies, spreading them out on the floor. I watched through this one-way window as Archie picked up the crayons and started drawing our family. He made Dad normal-sized, but Mom had these huge red hands. Douglas didn't say anything, just took notes while Archie drew more pictures. In one picture, Mom was really big, and Archie was tiny in the corner. Douglas asked him to tell a story about the picture, and Archie just shook his head and picked a different color. That same night, I got a Facebook message from Donna saying I'd be sued for defamation if I didn't retract my lies about her. I took a screenshot immediately and saw she'd already blocked me right after sending it. The message was full of threats about lawsuits and how I was ruining her reputation. I forwarded everything to Dad's lawyer, who said to keep documenting any contact from her. The financial stuff was getting bad too. Dad sat me down one evening and broke down crying, saying the legal fees had already hit $30,000. He showed me spreadsheets of his expenses and said he was thinking about selling his car and taking out a loan against his retirement account. Watching him calculate how much more he could afford made me feel sick. This whole thing started because Mom wanted money, and now Dad was going broke trying to protect us. He kept apologizing for burdening me with adult problems, but said he didn't know what else to do. Douglas sent over his preliminary assessment notes that both lawyers got to see. He'd written that Mom showed emotional volatility and concerning behavioral patterns. He specifically noted that Tyler's responses seemed rehearsed and mechanical during interviews. He was recommending psychological evaluations for both parents. Reading his notes felt like finally someone official was seeing what I'd been seeing all along. 2 days later, this guy named Mark Wiley from the Children's Advocacy Center called Dad's phone while I was there and said he needed to schedule interviews with all 3 of us kids for their investigation. He explained the interviews would be video recorded in a special room with toys and art stuff, so we wouldn't have to tell our stories over and over in court. Dad's hands shook as he wrote down the appointment times on the back of an envelope, and I noticed he'd been biting his nails down to the skin. Mark scheduled Archie first for the following week, then Tyler 2 days after that, and mine last. Requested Reds is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. The whole time he was talking, I kept thinking about how Archie would have to sit in that room and talk about Mom hurting him to a stranger with cameras rolling. 5 weeks dragged by with supervised visits and lawyer meetings, and Dad getting thinner every time I saw him. I was pushing my cart through the grocery store parking lot when Mom appeared out of nowhere and grabbed my arm hard enough to leave marks. She leaned in close and I could smell wine on her breath even though it was only 3 in the afternoon. She whispered that she had everything ready to take Archie and disappear if this didn't go her way, that she'd already put deposits down on an apartment 3 states away under a fake name. Her grip got tighter as she said I'd never find them, that she'd make sure Archie forgot I even existed. She let go and walked away before I could say anything, leaving me standing there with my groceries and my arm throbbing. The morning of Archie's interview at the CAC, Dad drove us to this building that looked like a regular house from the outside with a playground in the back. Mark met us in the waiting room and took Archie to a bright room with beanbags and shelves full of toys, while Dad and I watched through a monitor in another room. Archie picked up some action figures and started playing while Mark sat on the floor near him, not pushing, just asking easy questions about school and friends first. After about 20 minutes, Mark asked if anyone ever hurt him or made him feel unsafe, and Archie stopped playing with the toys. He said real quiet that Mommy gets mad and hits when I'm not there to stop her, and my chest got so tight I could barely breathe. Mark stayed totally calm and just nodded, writing notes on his clipboard while Archie went back to the toys. Archie didn't say anything about Dad doing anything bad to him or anyone else, just kept talking about how Mom would grab him too hard and shake him when she got angry. Tyler's interview happened 2 days later, and Mom brought him while Dad and I watched from the observation room, since the judge said we had the right to observe. Through the speaker, we could hear Tyler telling Mark about Dad touching him in bad ways, but the words sounded weird and rehearsed, not like how Tyler usually talked. He used the exact same phrases from that recording I had of Donna's coaching session, even pausing in the same weird places like he was trying to remember his lines. Mark asked him to describe what happened in his own words, and Tyler got confused, kept looking at the door like he wanted Mom to come help him. He started mixing up details, saying things happened at Dad's apartment when Dad hadn't even moved out yet during the time he was talking about. Mark took notes about everything, but his face stayed neutral the whole time. That same week, Dad got a letter from his bank with a statement showing Mom had withdrawn $50,000 from my college fund the day before our first court hearing. The account was supposed to be restricted for education only with both parents' signatures needed for withdrawals, but somehow Mom had gotten around that. Dad took the statement straight to the bank manager, who pulled up all the records and made certified copies showing the restrictions and the unauthorized withdrawal. The bank manager said they'd cooperate fully with any legal investigation and gave Dad a stack of papers documenting everything. 3 days later, an automated email from Dad's company showed up in his inbox about their HR policies during investigations involving criminal allegations. The email talked about reputation management and protecting the company image, and mentioned that employees under investigation could face termination, regardless of the legal outcome. Dad just stared at his laptop screen for like 10 minutes without moving, and I saw him pull up job listing websites later that night when he thought I was asleep. The next supervised visit between Mom and Archie happened at the visitation center, while Gwendolyn observed from behind the one-way glass. I wasn't there, but Gwendolyn wrote in her report that Mom gave Archie so much candy he got a stomachache. Then when the staff person turned to answer the phone, Mom leaned down and hissed something in Archie's ear that made him start crying. Mom didn't know the whole room had cameras recording everything, including audio, and Gwendolyn made sure to note the timestamp for the video. I spent that whole weekend at Dad's apartment going through boxes of family photos and screenshots of text messages on my laptop, organizing everything to show how involved Dad had always been in our lives. Every single soccer game had pictures of Dad cheering on the sidelines. Every school play had videos he took from the front row. Every birthday party showed him helping with decorations and cake. I printed out years of texts between him and Mom about pickups and drop-offs and doctor appointments and school conferences, highlighting every time he rearranged his work schedule to be there for us. The stack of evidence got so thick I had to buy those big binder clips from the office store to keep it all together. While doing research online about custody cases, I searched Donna's name and found this PDF of a complaint another family had filed with the state board about her 3 years ago. They said she'd coached their kid to lie in their custody case too, and the board had investigated her for ethics violations. I downloaded the PDF immediately and made copies on 3 different flash drives, plus uploaded it to 2 cloud services in case it disappeared from the website. 2 days later, Mom's lawyer sent Dad's lawyer this cease and desist letter about my recordings, claiming they were made illegally and couldn't be used in court. Dad's lawyer sent back a response the same day with the state law about one-party consent for recordings, which meant I only needed my own consent to record conversations I was part of, completely shutting down Mom's threat to have them thrown out. Douglas stood up at the next court date and told the judge both parents needed full mental health checks from a real court doctor. Mom's face got red and she started arguing about her rights, but the judge cut her off and said she'd do it or lose custody completely. The court picked this older woman psychologist who'd been doing these evaluations for 20 years and scheduled Mom for the following Tuesday and Dad for Thursday. I went with Dad to his appointment and sat in the waiting room for 3 hours while he answered hundreds of questions and did all these weird tests with shapes and patterns. Mom went to hers, but I heard from Tyler later that she kept stopping to argue with the doctor about every single question. 2 weeks passed before the status conference where both lawyers met with the judge in this small conference room next to the courtroom. Dad and I sat on a bench outside and I could hear voices through the door, even though I couldn't make out exact words until the psychologist came out to use the bathroom. And I heard her telling someone on the phone about Mom having major unresolved trauma with projection tendencies, while Dad just showed normal anxiety from the situation. That same night, I was going through Mom's old laptop that she'd left at Dad's apartment months ago, when I found her Facebook messages still logged in. There were dozens of messages between her and Donna from 3 months back, talking about payment for the therapy sessions that were actually coaching sessions. Donna kept mentioning she needed $5,000 for her own lawyer because of some complaint against her license, and Mom promised to pay her from my college fund once she got access to it. I took pictures of every single message with my phone and made screenshots and saved them to 3 different cloud accounts. The next supervised exchange happened at the visitation center on Saturday, and Tyler grabbed my arm in the parking lot while Mom was still in the bathroom. He looked scared and kept checking over his shoulder before telling me he couldn't remember what was real anymore because Mom kept telling him things happened, but his brain felt fuzzy about it all. He said when he asked Mom questions about the details, she'd get mad and yell at him for not trusting her, and then make him practice the story again until he got it right. Archie had been doing better at Dad's for a few weeks, but after that Saturday visit, he started wetting the bed every single night. Dad bought special mattress covers and never got mad about it, but I could see him writing everything down in this notebook he kept for court. Amy came to the apartment to check on Archie and documented the bedwetting as a trauma response in her medical notes, taking pictures of the calendar Dad had been using to track it. Mom couldn't stay off social media even with the judge's orders, and started posting these vague things about protecting innocent children from monsters, and how the system fails real victims. She'd post them at like 2 in the morning, then delete them by 6. But I set up alerts on my phone so I'd wake up and screenshot everything before she could remove them. One post said the courts protect abusers with money, while mothers who know the truth get silenced, and another said she'd do anything to save her babies from evil. Gwendolyn spent 6 weeks doing her investigation, and finally filed her report with the court recommending Dad get primary custody, and Mom only get supervised visits. She wrote that there was substantial risk of emotional and physical harm in Mom's care, based on all the documented evidence including the recordings and medical reports and witness statements. Douglas read Gwendolyn's report and added his own addendum about Tyler's inconsistent statements across 3 different interviews where he changed details about dates and places and couldn't explain the changes when asked. He recommended Tyler stay with Mom for now, but with mandatory therapy and close CPS monitoring to make sure the coaching stopped. The judge called everyone back to court the following Monday, and his face looked serious when he scheduled an evidentiary hearing for 6 weeks out. He looked straight at Mom and said any evidence of continued coaching would result in criminal charges for witness tampering and child abuse. Then he turned to Mom's lawyer and said, Donna better show up to testify or he'd issue a contempt order and have her arrested. The process server tried to find Donna for 2 whole weeks, but she kept dodging him by not answering her door and leaving work through the back entrance when she saw him coming. Finally, an investigator Mom's lawyer hired tracked her down at her new job at some insurance company and served her right in front of all her coworkers. After that, Mom went totally quiet on social media and stopped sending me texts about the case or trying to call me at Dad's apartment. 2 weeks later, I saw Dad's car listed on Craigslist for $12,000 below market value because he needed the money fast for lawyer fees. He showed me the stack of bills on his kitchen counter while making dinner. $30,000 already spent and more coming every week. The bus schedule was taped to his fridge now, and I watched him leave for work at 5:30 in the morning to make all the connections he needed. His suits hung looser on him, and when he hugged me, I could feel his ribs through his shirt. I started seeing a therapist who worked with kids in custody battles, and she had this small office with beanbag chairs and fidget toys everywhere. She kept telling me none of this was my job to fix, and that protecting Archie wasn't supposed to be my responsibility. But I couldn't stop feeling like I should have done more sooner. 3 days before the hearing, Douglas showed up at Mom's apartment building for a surprise visit and stood outside her door for 10 minutes recording on his phone. Later, he played it for Dad's lawyer, and you could hear Tyler's voice through the door saying the same exact phrases over and over like he was memorizing lines for a school play. Douglas typed up his report right there in the lawyer's office and sent it straight to the judge with a note about ongoing coaching concerns. The morning of the evidentiary hearing, Dad's lawyer wheeled in this cart with boxes of evidence all labeled with exhibit numbers. She spread out 12 different stacks on the table, including my phone recordings printed in transcript form, Dad's bank statements showing the $50,000 withdrawal, Amy's medical reports with photos of Archie's bruises and screenshots of Mom's deleted social media posts. Mom's lawyer stood up immediately objecting to half the evidence, saying it was obtained improperly or wasn't relevant, but the judge looked through each item carefully. When Mom's lawyer tried to get my recordings thrown out, saying I was too young and too biased to be credible, the judge held up the transcripts and said the words speak for themselves regardless of who recorded them. The court reporter's fingers flew across her keyboard trying to keep up as both lawyers argued about every single piece of evidence. Donna showed up on day 2 with her own lawyer, who looked nervous and kept whispering in her ear. When Dad's lawyer asked Donna about the coaching sessions, she immediately said she was invoking her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. The judge leaned forward and asked if she understood what that meant, and Donna's lawyer jumped up, saying his client would only answer that she provided emotional support to a friend. Every other question got the same response about the Fifth Amendment, and Donna kept looking at Mom, who was shaking her head slightly. Tyler appeared on the TV screen from another room in the courthouse for his testimony, and you could see him fidgeting with his shirt collar. Dad's lawyer asked him to describe what happened, and he started talking, but then stopped and said he couldn't remember the date. Then he said it was summer, but later said it was during school, and when asked which one was right, he looked confused and said Mom helped him remember better. His voice got smaller and smaller until the judge said they could take a break, and when they came back, Tyler just said he wanted to go home. Mark testified next about his interviews at the Advocacy Center and pulled up his notes on a laptop. He explained how Archie had disclosed physical abuse from Mom during their session, but never mentioned anything sexual happening with anyone. Then he showed a comparison chart of Tyler's statements, highlighting phrases that kids don't normally use like robbed of innocence and shattered trust, which were the exact same words from Donna's coaching session I'd recorded. The psychological evaluator took the stand last and spent an hour going through her evaluation results. She explained how Mom showed clear signs of unresolved childhood trauma that she was projecting onto Dad and recommended intensive therapy before any unsupervised contact with kids. She also said Dad's evaluation showed normal stress responses to false allegations, but no concerning psychological patterns. After 3 full days of testimony, the judge called everyone back into the courtroom and started reading his temporary orders. He gave Dad primary custody of me and Archie effective immediately, with Mom getting supervised visits only at the court visitation center. Tyler would stay with Mom, but with mandatory weekly therapy and monthly check-ins from CPS to monitor for any continued coaching. Mom started crying and her lawyer asked for reconsideration, but the judge said these orders would stand until the final hearing in 6 months. Dad's hands shook as he signed the custody papers, and Archie grabbed my hand so tight it hurt, but he was smiling for the first time in weeks. The judge wasn't done yet and kept talking while Mom's lawyer shuffled papers trying to find something to object to. He looked straight at Mom and said any more coaching or false claims would mean criminal charges, and she had 2 weeks to start therapy, or lose all visits completely. Mom's face went white and she started to argue, but her lawyer grabbed her arm and shook his head hard. The bailiff walked over and stood near their table while the judge kept listing requirements, and Mom had to sign papers saying she understood. 3 days later, Dad went back to work, but things were different now, with people whispering when he walked past their desks. His boss called him into the office and explained that HR was putting him on something called performance monitoring, which meant they'd be watching everything he did. Dad came home that night and threw his laptop bag on the couch harder than normal, and I saw the email on his screen about the promotion he'd been working on for 2 years going to someone else. The first supervised visit happened 2 weeks later at this building downtown with cameras everywhere and a lady watching us the whole time. Mom showed up wearing too much makeup, trying to cover how tired she looked, and she kept switching between crying about how we ruined her life and saying she forgave us for lying. Archie pressed against my side the whole hour and wouldn't look at her even when she tried to show him pictures on her phone. The supervisor wrote notes every time Mom raised her voice or reached toward us too fast, and Mom noticed and got madder. My first therapy appointment was the next day with this woman who had toys and books all over her office even though I was too old for them. She asked me about taking care of Archie, and I told her about making his lunches and checking his homework and knowing which cartoons helped him sleep. She wrote something down and said the word parentification, which I had to look up later on my phone. We spent the whole session talking about how I'd been doing grown-up stuff since I was little, like managing Mom's moods and protecting Archie. Douglas called Dad every month with updates and told us Tyler wasn't going to therapy regularly because Mom kept switching therapists. She'd take him to one for a few sessions, then say they were biased against her, and find a new one who didn't know the case yet. Tyler had been to 4 different therapists in 3 months, and none of them could make real progress when Mom kept starting over. 6 months passed, and we had routines at Dad's apartment with Archie sleeping through most nights without nightmares. He still had bad nights after visiting Mom where he'd wake up crying or wet the bed, but he was getting better faster each time. Dad bought him a nightlight that looked like stars on the ceiling, and we'd count them together when he couldn't sleep. I was doing homework one night when my phone buzzed at 2 a.m. with this long text from Mom saying she never meant for things to go this far. She wrote about how she was sorry and loved us and just wanted her family back, and maybe we could work things out. By the time I woke up, she'd sent 20 more messages taking it all back and saying I manipulated her when she was emotional and vulnerable. The 6-month review hearing came up, and we all went back to the same courtroom with the same judge reading through reports from Douglas and the supervised visit center. He kept the current orders exactly the same and added that Mom had to complete parenting classes on top of her therapy, which she still hadn't really started. He set another review for 6 months later and said stability was the most important thing for kids right now. I spent a whole weekend writing up instructions for Archie's school about his triggers and what helped him calm down when he got scared. The list had stuff like letting him call Dad if he had a panic attack and not making him talk about Mom if he didn't want to. The school counselor thanked me but said really gently that Dad should probably be handling this kind of thing, not me. Douglas called one day asking if I'd meet Tyler at a coffee shop with him there to supervise and make sure things stayed calm. Tyler looked smaller than I remembered and kept playing with his phone case while we sat at a corner table away from other people. He asked if I hated him without looking up, and I told him I didn't hate him, and none of this was his fault, because Mom did the same thing to him she tried with me. He nodded and said he knew Dad never really hurt him, but Mom got so mad when he tried to say that and he was scared of her. We started meeting with Tyler every few weeks at that coffee shop with Douglas there, watching us talk about normal stuff like school and video games instead of court stuff. Dad and I got into this routine where he'd start dinner around 6 while I sat at the kitchen table with Archie going through his spelling words and math problems. Dad would chop vegetables with his back to us, but I could see his shoulders tense up sometimes, and he'd stop cutting for a minute to take deep breaths. I still checked all the locks twice before bed and kept my phone charged and ready in case Mom showed up, even though the restraining order said she couldn't come near our building. Archie started sleeping better after a few months and stopped asking if Mom was coming to get him every time someone knocked on the door. The supervised visit center sent reports saying Mom was showing up to her therapy sessions and actually participating instead of just sitting there angry. During one visit, Archie actually talked to her about his new teacher instead of just nodding when she asked questions, though when she reached out to hug him goodbye, he stepped back and she had to settle for a wave. Tyler's therapist called Douglas one afternoon saying Tyler had finally admitted in session that he knew Dad never touched him and that Mom had taught him what to say. Mom apparently stood up and walked out of the session, but Tyler's grandmother brought him back the next week and kept bringing him even when Mom refused to go. 8 months passed with Mom doing her therapy and parenting classes while we settled into life at Dad's apartment. The judge reviewed everything at our next hearing and said Mom could have unsupervised daytime visits if her therapist thought she was ready. Her therapist stood up and told the judge Mom had made real progress understanding her own trauma and how she'd been hurting us. Archie agreed to try a Saturday afternoon with just Mom at the park, and when Dad picked him up 4 hours later, Archie was actually smiling and showing him a rock collection they'd started together. Dad's old company never called him back, but he found a job at a smaller firm doing similar work for less money. He said not having to explain our situation to coworkers who already knew was worth taking the pay cut. Archie joined a soccer team that practiced at the field behind his school, and Dad signed up to help coach even though he'd never played soccer in his life. Mom started showing up to games wearing regular clothes instead of the dramatic outfits she used to wear to court, and she'd stand on the opposite sideline from Dad, but she'd cheer for Archie without making it about herself. Tyler asked his grandmother if he could join the team too, and pretty soon he and Archie were passing the ball back and forth at practice like regular brothers. I spent months filling out college applications and financial aid forms, trying to figure out how to pay for school without my college fund. The acceptance letter from state came with enough grants and scholarships to cover everything Mom had taken plus meal plans and books. Dad read the letter 3 times before he started crying and pulled me into this tight hug saying he was proud of how I'd protected everyone when things got bad. The week before I left for college, I started packing boxes in my room, while Archie sat on my bed asking if I'd still text him every day. Dad brought home a label maker from work and typed out neat labels for each box with my dorm address, while Archie decorated them with stickers from his collection. Mom sent a text saying congratulations on getting into state, and that she was proud even though she knew I probably didn't want to hear from her. We weren't some perfect family that worked everything out and got back together like nothing happened, but we were all in therapy and trying to figure out how to move forward. Dad still had panic attacks sometimes, and I still recorded conversations just in case. But Archie was laughing again and making friends. And that felt like enough for now. That's it for today's story. Thanks for letting me share it with you. I really do hope it brightened your day even a little. Stick around by subscribing and we'll do it again soon.